For 13 years, Britney Spears couldn't spend her own money, couldn't choose her friends, couldn't remove her own IU. She was one of the highest-earning performers in the world. And legally, she had less autonomy than a child. This isn't a story about mental health. It's a story about what happens when protection becomes permanent. And when permanence becomes profitable. The conservatorship began in 2008. Britney Spears was 26 years old. She had been in the public eye since she was 16. A child star manufactured into a teen icon, then scaled into a global product. By her early 20s, she wasn't just famous, she was industrial. Albums, tours, endorsements, paparazzi cycles, tabloid ecosystems. Her image wasn't simply consumed, it was processed. By 2007, the system that had extracted value from her since adolescence began collapsing under its own weight. The pressure was no longer invisible. It leaked into public view. The images are now cultural shorthand. The shaved head, the umbrella, the car window, the custody fight, the constant flash of cameras. A psychological crisis flattened into spectacle. The breakdown wasn't treated as an emergency. It was treated as content. In January 2008, Spears was placed on a psychiatric hold. Shortly after, her father, Jamie Spears, petitioned the court for a temporary conservatorship. The argument was simple and devastating. Britney could not care for herself. She could not manage her finances. She was a danger to her own well-being. The court agreed. The conservatorship was granted. It was meant to be temporary. It lasted 13 years. A conservatorship is not designed for people like Britney Spears. It is an extreme legal tool, intended primarily for individuals with advanced dementia or profound cognitive impairment. When implemented, it strips a person of legal agency. The conservator becomes the decision maker. Finances, medical treatment, contracts, daily health. In Britney's case, the conservatorship did not merely limit her autonomy. It erased it. Her father controlled her money, her doctors, her career, her schedule, her home, her transportation, her voting rights, her ability to marry, her reproductive system. This was not partial oversight. It was total authority. And yet, almost immediately, the supposed logic of the arrangement began to fracture. Because Britney never stopped working. She didn't retreat from public life. She didn't disappear into care. She didn't withdraw from professional obligations. Instead, she became one of the most productive assets in the entertainment industry. World tours, television contracts, album cycle, a Las Vegas residency grossing over $130 million, all while legally deemed incapable of managing her own existence. This contradiction sat in plain sight. If someone is mentally unfit to choose their friends, how are they fit to anchor a 4-year Vegas residency? If someone is incapable of consenting to medical decisions, how are they capable of performing precision choreography night after night? If someone requires a conservator to buy groceries, how are they trusted to generate hundreds of millions of dollars? The system's response was not to resolve the contradiction. It was to ignore it. Court records were sealed. Hearings were closed. Medical evaluations were confidential. Journalists repeated press releases. Fans were told to be grateful for the comeback. The narrative hardened. Britney had been saved. And once a rescue narrative is accepted, questioning it becomes heresy. The conservatorship created an infrastructure. Lawyers, business managers, medical professionals, security teams, publicists, all operating under the legal umbrella of protection, all extracting compensation from Britney's estate. Jamie Spears, as conservator, received a salary. His attorneys billed hourly. Business managers took percentages. Every extension of the conservatorship extended revenue streams. Oversight became employment. This is where the story stops being personal and becomes structural. Because no single villain is required when incentives align. The courts, in theory, exist as safeguards. Conservatorship are meant to be reviewed regularly. Judges are meant to ask whether conditions have changed, whether autonomy can be restored, whether the measure is still necessary. In practice, the burden of proof rests with the conservatee, the very person stripped of the legal ability to advocate for themselves. Britney could not freely hire her own lawyer. She could not choose her own doctors. She could not access her own records without approval. To escape the conservatorship, she had to prove competence within a system designed to deny her agency. This is not a legal loophole. It is the system functioning as designed. California's conservatorship framework is notoriously opaque. Once established, it creates institutional inertia. Judges defer to medical opinions. Doctors defer to legal authority. Everyone defers to procedure. Responsibility dissolves into process. Britney objected repeatedly. Court filings show resistance as early as 2014. She asked for changes. She requested independent counsel. She questioned the necessity of the arrangement. Her objections were dismissed. The system interpreted her resistance not as evidence of autonomy, but as further justification for control. Doctors played a critical role. Under the conservatorship, medical consent became theoretical. Treatment plans were not negotiated. They were imposed. Medication was adjusted not solely for health outcomes, but for compliance. In her 2021 testimony, Britney described being placed on lithium without consent after resisting a performance schedule. Lithium is not a casual prescription. It is a powerful drug with significant side effects. It dulls emotion. It slows cognition. It suppresses volatility. It also suppresses resistance. Therapy in this context ceased to be care. It became surveillance. She was required to attend sessions multiple times per week, far from home, with a therapist she did not choose. Privacy was not guaranteed. Progress was measured by obedience. Medical ethics rely on informed consent. Conservatorship dissolves consent into authority. The industry benefited from this arrangement. Promoters booked tours knowing Britney had no legal capacity to refuse. Labels released albums backed by contracts she could not renegotiate. Venues hosted residencies under the assumption of stability, not mental stability, but legal stability. The show would go on because the law ensured it would. Media coverage functioned as insulation. Interviews were edited. Questions were softened. Narrative control replaced inquiry. Britney's labor was framed as empowerment. Her exhaustion was reframed as dedication. Any visible discomfort was explained away as lingering fragility, something the conservatorship was supposedly managing. When fans noticed inconsistencies, they were mocked. The hashtag Free Britney movement began not as activism, but as suspicion. Something felt wrong. Posts felt off. Smiles looked rehearsed. Statements contradicted actions. The response was ridicule. Conspiracy theories. Parasocial delusion. Internet hysteria. But suspicion persisted. And suspicion spread. In 2019, Britney canceled a planned Las Vegas residency. The official reason was her father's health. Shortly after, reports emerged that she had been admitted to a mental health facility. The narrative repeated itself. Britney was unwell. Britney needed protection. Britney was being cared for. What was not explained was why a woman capable of generating millions was incapable of choosing rest. Public pressure mounted. Protests formed. Court transcripts leaked. The sealed system began to CR. And then, in June 2021, Britney Spears spoke. For the first time in 13 years, the person at the center of the system addressed it directly. Her testimony was not emotional. It was procedural. She described schedules, medications, threats, consequences, work or punishment, compliance or confinement. She described being denied the right to remove her IUD, not by a doctor concerned about health risks, but by a legal structure concerned about control. Reproductive autonomy was not delayed. It was prohibited. She said the conservatorship was abusive. That word changed everything. Because abuse reframes protection as coercion. And coercion exposes motive. Within months, the system began to retreat. Jamie Spears stepped down as conservator of her person. Legal challenges accelerated. In November 2021, the conservatorship was terminated. No criminal charges followed. No institutional reforms occurred. No accountability was imposed. The system did not collapse. It simply disengaged. Britney Spears emerged legally free at 39 years old. After spending nearly a third of her life under control, autonomy was returned without instructions, without reparations, without acknowledgement of harm. Freedom does not erase conditioning. Since the conservatorship ended, Britney has spoken about trauma, the difficulty of decision-making, the erosion of trust, the challenge of rebuilding identity after years of enforced compliance. Control does not end when authority is removed. It ends when internalized permission is unlearned. The broader implications are uncomfortable. Britney's case was not unique. It was visible. Visibility did not save her. It protected the system. The same conservatorship laws remain in place. The same financial incentives persist. The same opacity shields similar arrangements from scrutiny. Reform has been discussed, not enacted. Protection remains a narrative. Permanence remains a risk. Profit remains the accelerant. Britney was valuable enough to control. Others will be too. Some stories end. Legends don't. This is CLS.